Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Can I ask Keith my question now?
Yes.
Keith, I was just curious whether you knew of any requirement in the Zoom era of people keeping their videos on during the meeting. Is there any issues there with the Brown Act? People turn their cameras off or on?
No, the only issue we've ran into is when you're in a closed session and the Zoom camera is off, and so anybody technically could be listening in, but there's nothing in the Brown Act or the governor's orders that speak to cameras. Just teleconferencing is the word it uses, which doesn't require a video.
Okay, great. Then let's call this meeting to order. My clock shows 6:05, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't think I have to lead it. Hank, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You're muted, however.
You have to unmute to do that, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America,
and
the
the
republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
Nation.
under God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and justice
Justice
for
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 all.
all.
All right, moving on. Yeah. Thank you. Let's move on to roll call.
Chairman Leach,
Here.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Here.
Commissioner Bakta,
Here.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Here,
Commissioner Liu,
Here.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Here.
and Commissioner Lotharp is absent.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Then let's move on to item 4, which is a call for public comment for items not on the agenda tonight. So just as a reminder, we're going to hold a separate public hearing for the primary agenda item. So if your comment pertains to the proposed ordinance on cannabis businesses, please don't make your comments now, but wait until we open the hearing for that particular agenda item. So right now we're accepting public comments for any other items that are not on the agenda. And as a reminder, you can email publicworks, all one word, at cityofbishop.com. City of Bishop is also all one word. And write public comment in the subject line. And in the body of the email, include the item number and or title of the item, as well as your comments. In this case, for things not on the agenda, just make your comments. If you would like the comment to be read out loud, not to exceed 3 minutes, please write read out loud at meeting at the top of the email. Let's see, and you may also, if you have joined the Planning Commission meeting via the Zoom webinar, you can use the hand waving feature, the little button on the bottom of your screen, to indicate that you want to make a public comment, and when appropriate, you'll be called on to speak, also not to exceed 3 minutes. And also, if you need special assistance to participate in the meeting, please contact the city clerk at 760-873-5863, extension 24. I think we needed advance notification for that, but I'll read it anyway. Okay. So we'll give it a few seconds. Do we have any public comments at this time for items not on the agenda?
No.
Okay. Alrighty, then let us move on to, and just a reminder to anybody watching, you'll have another opportunity to make comments on the agendized items. Then let's move to approval of minutes. These are the minutes of the Planning Commission held last month, February 23rd, 2021. And do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
There might be one, sorry. There might be one small correction to be made in section 5.32.120. Third line down, and determine that cannabis retailer operations should be responsible for development. I believe it's cannabis retailer operators should not be responsible for development.
Trisha, where are you exactly again?
Section 5.32.120. Third line down.
Ah, yes.
And there might need to be the inclusion of the word not.
I would agree with the substance of that. I think the modifications to the ordinance reflect that.
Okay.
While we're indicating things, can we just make modifications and then approve them as modified at the end? Okay. I had a comment about the approval of minutes at the previous meeting. I want to say that Andrew abstained. Is that correct?
That is correct, because I was not at the prior meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The minutes indicate that Andrew was an aye. So I think the minute should be amended to indicate that he abstained.
What?
I'm sorry, the minutes here for February 23rd that Andrew is absent?
Sorry, the minutes, Andrew was present for the last meeting, but the approval of the previous minutes, Andrew abstained because he hadn't been on the planning commission for that meeting.
Okay, and have him abstain. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then I found one other issue, which was the same issue that Heather pointed out last time, which is that my name is misspelled. Not that it matters, I think, terribly, but at the end of section 6, public hearing in the minutes, it says Chairman Leith, L-E-I-T-H. It should be T-C-H.
I'm sorry, where is it at the public hearing? Number 6, public hearing.
Number 6, it's right towards the bottom of that section where it says Vice Chairman Lind made a motion to close the public hearing and Chairman Leith
There
seconded
it
the
is,
motion.
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then what was the section that Chairman Liu brought up? I'm sorry, I'm moving slow.
I
No
think
worries. Section
sorry,
5.
go ahead, Tricia.
Sorry, section 5.32.120.
Okay, there's 2 listed. Which one is it?
It's the second one.
Okay.
Application of chapter other legal duties, B3.
Okay.
So it's the 3rd line down, and
Should
it goes.
not be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then my requested modification to the minutes would be that in those bullet points in that same section of the minutes, that there be added that we had discussion and that staff was directed to bring maps or overlay information in regards to the downtown plan, revitalization plan, and what, zones would intersect essentially between the downtown plan and where cannabis would be allowed downtown. That wasn't anywhere in the minutes, and we actually discussed that fairly heavily. So I'd like that to be included, as well as the fact that I think Grace Lutheran Church preschool, or Grace Lutheran Preschool and Discovery Point on Yaney were also omitted from the map that she showed initially, that where the zones would intersect as well, or the 600-foot barrier. If we could please add those to the minutes, because we did talk about those 2 things.
Yep, we had discussion about that.
And is Discovery Point moving to the old Country Schoolhouse location?
I think they're going to still be at all 3 at least 2 or 3 locations.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're still trying to close out the minutes from the last meeting. Any other amendments to the minutes as written? Okay, then I'm going to make a motion that we approve the minutes as just amended. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, can we have the vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
He's muted.
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yeah.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Abstain.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis.
Yes.
Minutes of the Planning Commission meeting held on February 23rd, 2021, approved with the modifications noted.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Then moving on to item 6, we will now open the public hearing on consideration of a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 79, entitled Marijuana Cultivation and Marijuana-Related Businesses, amending Title 17, Chapter 1780, entitled Legal Requirements, and adding Chapter 532, entitled Commercial Cannabis Activity. So just a reminder that if you want to submit a comment by email, please email publicworks@cityofbishop.com with the phrase public comment in the subject line. And if you want to make a comment here in the meeting, please use the hand waving feature of Zoom, and we'll call on you when we get to that point. And just another reminder to please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less, or your written remarks that you want read at the meeting to take 3 minutes or fewer to read. Elaine, do you want to make a report on the item before we open the public hearing, or save that until the commissioner discussion?
If it pleases the commission, I'd like to provide a summary of the ordinance and the updates that were made at the last meeting.
Perfect. Then
Okay.
I will give the
Thank
floor to you before we take public comments.
Good evening, commissioners. It's very nice to see all of you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. As you are aware, this item this evening is a continuation of the meeting held February 23rd, 2021, last month, where we considered the same item. First, I'll provide a brief summary of the ordinance as we discussed it last month, and then an overview of the revisions and the discussion that the commission had, the changes that staff has made accordingly, as well as a report on the additional information that the commission had requested. As introduced, this ordinance adds Chapter 5.32, which will allow for commercial cannabis activity. Specifically, it will allow for 2 cannabis storefront retailers in the C1 and C2 zones in Bishop, which are the general commercial and retail and general commercial districts. It will also allow for non-storefront retail, which would be interpreted as delivery, to have establishments in the C2 and the M1 districts, M1 being industrial. In accordance with state law, the ordinance would prohibit any establishment from opening within 600 feet of a school or a daycare facility. It would require that each potential business would receive a distinct approval from the city council after it has met the minimum requirements within the ordinance. The business would be required to procure all appropriate permits. Operating restrictions are put in place on the establishment, which would include operating hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., security measures, record keeping requirements, and odor requirements. The ordinance would disallow anyone under the age of 21 from being on premises, would not allow for any consumption on site, would not allow for alcohol sales or consumption on site, would require applicant background checks by the police, the Bishop Police Department. And the security requirements would include on-site cameras, secured storage, panic buttons, a professionally installed security system, a buzz-in entry, licensed security personnel on site. Also, if the applicant chose to install bars on the windows, those would need to be installed inside. The ordinance also requires that the business would designate a staff person to be a point of contact for the city to meet with regarding any concerns. And also any resident within business or resident within 100 feet of the business would also have access to the staff personnel if there were concerns from surrounding neighbors. The ordinance also requires the dispensary to notify the city within 24 hours if there are any discrepancies in inventory, theft, or loss. Finally, this ordinance requires a development agreement be put in place with the city that would cover specific elements of their proposal for consideration by the city council. At our last planning commission meeting, the requirements and the provisions of the development agreement were not enumerated. That was one of the things that the planning commission had asked us to revise. So at this time, that concludes my summary of the outline of the ordinance. At this time, I will go over the discussion that was had by the planning commission last month, the direction that was given to staff, and the changes that were made. The first is in relationship to that development agreement, which is section 17.79.090. And the commission had requested what the terms and provisions would be. So staff has added development standards, design and construction standards, signage requirements, security plans, community benefits, annual review, contractual payments, and default and remedies as the terms and provisions of the required development agreement. For section 5.32.070, there was discussion last month regarding the prohibition of the transfer of the cannabis permits. This came from a public comment. Following discussion, the commission provided the direction to staff to allow for the transfer of the permit to another owner at the discretion of the city council. And that change has been made accordingly in the ordinance in front of you this evening. For section 5.32.090J with regards to minors, the commission requested that the ordinance be revised to reflect the minimum age associated with recreational marijuana as opposed to medicinal marijuana. And so the ordinance was revised to prohibit anyone under the age of 21 from being on premises. Section 5.32.100, additional operating requirements for storefront cannabis retailers and dispensaries. The commission discussed the requirement to include surveillance equipment that could be accessed remotely by the city of Bishop. The staff's understanding that we were asked to remove this provision from the ordinance, and that's what we did. Additionally, on this item, the commission requested that staff look at the requirements of the town of Mammoth Lakes, Mono County, and Inyo County for remote access to video surveillance. We looked at those three ordinances. None of our neighboring jurisdictions require remote access of the video surveillance, though all of them do require that video surveillance is held for 30 to 90 days and made available to the city upon request. Section 5.32.110, additional operating requirements for non-storefront cannabis. The commission discussed the requirement to include global positioning systems or GPS devices for delivery cars. Similarly, the commission asked staff to look at what the requirements are for Mono County, Inyo County, and the town of Mammoth Lakes. And those requirements were different in each jurisdiction. Mono County does not allow for delivery. Inyo County allows for the applicant to develop their own security plan consistent with state law. And there is, I think, an error in my staff report that the town of Mammoth Lakes also does require a global positioning system, and that it's now my understanding that that is state law, that a GPS is required in delivery vehicles. Section 5.32.120, application of chapter and other legal duties. The commission asked that the section be modified to allow for a reasonable amount of time for the cannabis retailers to come into compliance with any state or new state or local regulations. And the ordinance was changed accordingly. Section 5.32.120, other legal duties with regards to the development of educational materials. the commission discussed that the potential applicants would not be responsible for the development of educational materials, but would be responsible for providing the resources to health partners in the community to develop educational materials for youth, and the ordinance was changed accordingly. And then finally, the commission discussed potentially banning or limiting flavored products. We discussed that that was outside the purview of the Planning Commission, but that the Planning Commission could include a recommendation to the City Council for discussion when the ordinance is taken in front of the City Council. As I had mentioned, there was 2 items that the Planning Commission had requested staff do some research and come back. Those were with regards to the remote video surveillance and the GPS, and I think that I included that in my staff report already. And then finally, there was the request from Commissioner Lind to provide maps that look at what the allowable areas would be for dispensaries, looking first at including the 2 daycare facilities that had been left off the map previously, and then secondly, looking at what areas would allow for dispensaries if the specific plan boundary was excluded. And I have those prepared for you. If you hold on just a moment, I'll share my screen. Okay. So if you'll see here, can everyone see my screen first? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Because now I can't see you. So this is the 600-foot radius from schools. You can see that the Discovery Point facility on Yaney Street, as well as the Grace Lutheran Preschool, have both been added. And this is what that would look like if it was overlaid on top of our zoning. So the allowable zones for storefront dispensary would include this pink zone here that is C1, as well as the orange area, which is C2. And then we were also asked to look at including the specific plan boundary as an excluded area. So that is this area that is not a circle, not a radius. And if you overlay that on top of the allowable zoning, again, the zones that would allow for dispensaries include the pink C1 area, as well as the orange C2 area. And then the non-storefront retailers would be allowed in the orange C2 area, as well as this purple M1 area that is located at the northeast corner of city limits. And so with that concludes my overview of the ordinance. This is a discussion that we had at the meeting in February and the items that the commission requested additional information on. I'm happy to take any questions you have at this time. Thank you.
Just a reminder that we are still in the public hearing section. So if commissioners have questions at this time, please keep them short because we'll have plenty of time to discuss when we move on to new business.
Blaine, can you email those maps really quick so I could look at them on a separate thing, possibly print?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other quick comments from commissioners before we open the floor to public comment? Okay, great. So Michelle, I know we had some emails come in, and I think last time we determined that you should be the one to read them.
Yes.
So
we have,
that same procedure.
have the one email that went out to the commissioners this afternoon, and we have one attendee that has their hand raised. Which would you like to go first, Chairman?
Why don't we start with the attendee, and then we can go to the written remarks.
Okay, so it's Tiffany Lau. So I'm gonna allow her to talk, okay?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Lau and I live in Bishop. I was wondering, have all planning commissioners been inside the 2 dispensaries in the Rite Aid Shopping Center? Some of the comments at the last meeting lead me to believe that some have never set foot inside either shop. I've been inside both and they were clean, well lit, and nicely decorated. Rather than relying on preconceived ideas of what something is, shouldn't we step outside our comfort zones to truly understand the reality of a subject? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lau. Do we? I'm sorry. I'm confused about whether or not we are allowed to respond to public comments at this time. Keith, can you comment on that?
You're allowed to make brief responses to public comments. You can't take any action on items that aren't on the agenda. Generally, it's not a good idea to engage in a back and forth with every public comment. It sets a precedent that is difficult to reverse at times. It's typically the time for the public to make comments for you to consider, nothing further.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Ms. Lau, for commenting. And Michelle, would you like to read the other public comment that we received?
Yes. Okay, we received a public comment by email today from Robert Calvert of Accent Cannabis Dispensary up in Mammoth. Dear Planning Commission members, I am writing to you in regard to the item on your agenda concerning the upcoming cannabis dispensary regulations for the city of Bishop. While we at Accent are in total support of your work on this matter, there are a couple of items in the ordinance that are a source of concern, and we would like to express our views on them. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to do so, and your consideration will be much appreciated by the undersigned and all the people at Accent. Due to the 3-minute limit, I have only referenced section numbers. Section 5.32.120E.3. City obtaining samples. We understand that the Planning Commission does not want to open Bishop up to any business that might sell adulterated products to the general public. While we have no objection to this section or the procedure outlined therein, we wanted the Commission to know that under California state law, all products that we sell must be tested, and a COA, certificate of analysis, is provided for each product that we keep on hand. These products come in a child-proof sealed wrapper or container or both before we allow to place them in the store for sale. So, in fact, all of our products are pre-tested by state licensed testing companies and supervised by the state of California to ensure the safety of what we offer to the general public. Accordingly, if the city of Bishop were to engage in a testing program as well, it would be expensive and duplicative. The important takeaway here for those of you who have not been in a licensed dispensary as of late, noting that we offer is loose or open to handling by our staff or the public at any time. It all comes from wholesalers and manufacturers, pre-sealed, wrapped, and labeled with required information. After it's been tested and packaged, there is no opportunity for anyone to change or adulterate the contents without destroying the packaging first. Second, banning flavored products. This is a solution for a problem that we don't have. The world that would destroy the viability of our business and do nothing to solve the problem that is trying to address. We understand that the Commission has a huge concern about minors and vaping flavored tobacco products. This is a very serious problem, and as parents ourselves, we totally share the Commission's unwillingness to do anything that would exacerbate that threat to the health of our youth. However, limiting use of flavored products will not help because the problem does not stem from cannabis. Put simply, young people are vaping flavored tobacco. We do not now, nor will we ever sell tobacco. It is against state law. Interestingly, minors are allowed in liquor stores and smoke shops when accompanied by an adult, not necessarily a parent, while minors are not allowed in cannabis dispensaries under any circumstances. Conversely, banning the flavored products in our stores would effectively clean out the entire shop. Virtually all cannabis products are flavored, besides obviously in the case of edibles and drinkables. Each cannabis flower, for example, Banana Dream or Sour Berry Almora, has a distinct flavor of its own that could conceivably run afoul of any anti-flavoring ordinance. Not only that, but banning something easy to buy elsewhere will not accomplish anything of value. It will simply redirect the business and the resultant tax money to Inyo and Mono counties. Right now, there are dispensaries a few feet north of the Bishop City line on Highway 395, not to mention Mono. If Bishop is prevented from selling what sells, customers will simply go to the competition a little way up the road. Why we'd never advocate that Bishop allow something destructive to children, no matter what the circumstances, that's not what we have here. We don't sell tobacco. That said, the money that we have pledged for youth education projects could easily be directed to anti-vaping campaigns, even though that's tobacco, not cannabis. With that in mind, we would ask that the commission do not undermine your own effort to create an effective structure for administering legal cannabis sales by making them unlawful at the same time. Third, section 5.32.100 B.1.1, uniformed security guards. We understand that the City of Bishop does not want to create a public nuisance by licensing a business that becomes a locus for bad behavior by local citizens or tourists passing through. Having no actual experience with an operating cannabis dispensary in Bishop, the Planning Commission has tried to anticipate the problems that could arise and nip them in the bud before they become real headaches that won't go away. However, the solution proposed will be expensive and cumbersome, so we ask, is it necessary and well advised? The real-world answer based on experience is no. Fortunately, the city has some terrific sources of information on this topic to confirm or deny what I have said. The town of Mammoth Lakes has had a cannabis dispensary for well over 10 years, and Chief Al Davis will tell you that the shop has been the source of a couple of shoplifting complaints and nothing else over that time. Likewise, Mono Sheriff Braun and Inyo Sheriff Hallowell can advise you of their experience in cannabis dispensaries in their jurisdiction. Frankly, the negative image of a bunch of dopers stranding around causing trouble just doesn't happen. The reality is that, like any other store, people come in, buy what they want, and leave to go about their day. Any kind of smoking is not allowed in the store or outside around the area of the store. Expensive armed guards are simply a solution in search of a problem, and the money generated for that would be better used for youth education programs I described earlier in this letter. Thank you for your most kind attention and consideration to these concerns. Very truly yours, Robert Calvert.
Okay, well, thanks to Mr. Calvert for that very extensive and elaborated comment. Have we received any other public comments in the interim, Michelle?
No other public comments.
Okay, and do we have any other people on the webinar raising their hand?
Nobody else has their hand waved.
Okay, then I would move that we close the public hearing at this time. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Okay, Michelle, can we have a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lind,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar, I saw him say yes. Commissioner Bakta,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis.
Yes.
The public hearing is now closed at 6:38.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Then we will move on to item 7A, new business. Consideration of a resolution recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 79, entitled Marijuana Cultivation and Marijuana-Related Businesses, amending Title 17, Chapter 1780, entitled Legal Requirements, and adding Chapter 5.32, entitled Commercial Cannabis Activity. I know we already had a fairly extensive staff report. Elaine, is there anything further you would like to add before we open it to the commissioners?
Thank you, Commissioner Leach. I have nothing to add except that I did email the maps to each of you, and I can put them back on the screen at your request. Thank you.
Okay, great. Then at this time, we're going to open the discussion for commissioners. And the only thing I would say by way of a preface is since we, I think all of us were present last time except for Hank. And we made it through to the end of the document as it then was. So maybe a useful way to proceed is just to start with any remaining unresolved items from the last time, and then we can move on to new points the commissioners want to raise since the last discussion. But with that, I'll open the floor to any of our commissioners.
Can I ask regarding some language regarding, there's still a reference to minors being able to go into stores in section 5.32.090, section J.
5.32090.
Subheading minors, item number 1.
Mhm.
Line 2 has the exception for persons, inferring persons under 18 who are accompanied by their parent or guardian or primary caregiver. I think that's moot now with the new language that we're adopting, which is more in line with state law.
Well, the section used to read 18 and it was changed to 21. Is that right?
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right. So,
Okay.
but there's still the line that says persons under the age of 21 shall not enter. Okay. So it's my understanding that you absolutely may not enter with even your parent and even your guardian.
Is it, according to state law?
That's correct.
Okay.
So Patricia, and I see what you're saying. So J1, persons under the age of 21 years shall not be allowed to on the premises of a cannabis business, period, and then omit unless the person is accompanied by their own parent, guardian, or primary caregiver.
Exactly, I agree.
And regarding, there is a public comment question regarding that, if we're allowed to address
Oh,
it.
in the chat.
Right,
And that also needs to happen in section 2 as well.
that is correct.
Yes.
I just want to chime in really quick here, which is that I would refer to Council Collins and Chairman Leach, but generally we do not take public comment after the public comment period has closed.
Okay. That's fine. Do we know? So we know for a fact that the state law says no one under 21 can enter.
If it is
premises?
an adult use license, then it's 21 and over, like a bar.
Period. Okay.
If it's a medical marijuana license, then you can be, I believe, between the ages of 18 and 21 without your parent, as long as you have the card.
Okay.
And I believe if you're a child needing cannabis for, say, seizures or whatnot, in that case, perhaps you can go with your parent with your medical recommendation / card to only a medical licensee. But since we're only addressing adult use, also known as recreational licensees, I think just to avoid any confusion or loopholes, we should take out any reference to any granted adult persons between the ages of 18 and 21.
Okay. Do we have any strong objections from other commissioners to making that modification? Because if we don't, we can agree to make it and then just vote at the end as part of the amended document.
I agree with the modification.
Okay. Since I'm hearing crickets for the rest of the commissioners, I will assume that that is consent. Is that okay, Keith, to make that assumption?
Yeah, so if I could just make sure that every commissioner is clear, what I think the chairman is trying to do here is to systematically go through this document and make any revisions and get consensus on each of those revisions as we go through. That way, once the entire document has been reviewed and discussed, we can make one motion to approve or deny the resolution as amended. And if there are concerns about any of these amendments, now would be the time to raise them. So if it is okay for the chairman to assume that if nobody's raising objections, that we have a consensus on the proposed revisions.
Okay, thank you, Keith. That is certainly my intent. And just to expand on that, and please comment if I'm misspeaking, if there is an item that we discuss and we don't have a clear consensus, we can make a motion to make that specific change and vote on that specific change. And the change will either be approved or denied, and we'll move on to the next issue. That's your understanding, Keith, of how we should proceed also?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Tricia. So it sounds like we have consensus to strike the remainder of the first sentence in J1 of that section after shall not be allowed on the premises of a cannabis business. Okay. If I could, Elaine, it says in the staff report, we had discussed the requirement about the remote accessible surveillance the last time. And my memory, as your report indicated, was that there was consensus that was overreach, provided that it was consistent with the ordinances around us. And I think you've demonstrated that those ordinances don't require that. But I still see language in that section, although you said that it was removed from the ordinance. And that would be 5.32.100, section B, B.1.d. I still see the cannabis dispensary shall be responsible for ensuring that the security surveillance is remotely accessible by the city administrator or his or her designees, and that it is compatible with the city's software and hardware.
Number again, Eric? 5.
It's on page 23, section 5.32.100, section B.1.d.
Little d, that's what I'm looking for.
Little d is in dog.
Because I do not feel like we had consensus to remove that entire ordinance section last time. I thought we were looking for more direction.
Yeah.
And I feel, hold on.
Yeah.
That the direction that we've received is that there is video surveillance being obtained for up to 30 to 90 days by local jurisdictions around us. And that's how I believe the ordinance should read.
Yeah, I also agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify what I was saying. I'm not suggesting that section little d should be struck. Just the one sentence that says, the cannabis dispensary shall be responsible for ensuring that the security surveillance is remotely accessible. The rest of it should stand as written, I believe. So installing 24-hour security cameras, covering all interior spaces, stored for any period of time on a regular basis. And the final sentence, video recording shall be maintained for a minimum of 45 days and shall be made available to the city administrator or his designee upon request. It's just the one sentence about making it remotely accessible that we had issues with. Do you agree with that? Sorry, Harry, are you raising your hand?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. And this will be most to our attorney, Kevin, sir. And it's section B, 1D. And it says, what they cannot be dispensed should be responsible for ensuring that the security surveillance camera footage is remotely accessible by the city administrator and the city police department. I don't know, but do you think in the future that language will be a lawsuit to set up a precedent because of freedom of business or whatever in the near future by somebody?
No, not in the near future. The state laws governing marijuana give local jurisdictions the authority to impose reasonable regulations on cannabis businesses. This language is found in many other jurisdictions. We think we would have found some challenge to some of those larger jurisdictions that include this. So I don't know that the risk of a lawsuit over this language is too great.
Okay. Also, sir, I have another question. I believe when in the section of record keeping, my concern is this business is done mostly on cash basis. Bank don't want to, marijuana money to be deposited into the accounts or whatever, So in record, how the city is going to try to keep, records are accurate. Because if the supplier comes, he has to get paid in cash. Somebody might also say, okay, throw me one more box and I'll give you on the side some cash money. So how that is going to be, paper trace, or how can is anything the city is planning to do?
Yes, so if you look in section 5.32.100A, where it talks about record keeping, this language imposes significant record keeping requirements regardless of the type of payment that the cannabis business accepts. They are required to keep a record for 4 years under subsection 3. And then in subsection 5, it allows the city of Bishop to have access to these books and records to conduct an audit. And we can do that at any time under the proposed version that's before you tonight. So your question is, how is the city going to know if they're fudging their books and falsifying and taking shipments off the record and under the table?
Mm-hmm.
We could investigate that the same way the city investigates any violation of its municipal code. The law enforcement agency could get involved. The police department could conduct operations and do what they need to do as directed by the city.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay. Can we then return to the original question, which was just that one line about the remote surveillance? Elaine, you agree that it's still in the draft before us?
I do, and I
Okay.
apologize for that oversight on my part.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to point it out. And so my suggestion, which was compatible with our discussion last time, is that we modify section little d just to delete the sentence beginning, the cannabis dispensary shall be responsible for ensuring that the security surveillance cameras footage is remotely accessible. Just that one sentence. And the rest of that section would remain as stands. Okay, do we have any strong disagreements with that?
Mm-mm.
No disagreement.
Okay, and that addresses Harry's concern as well. Okay, do we have other comments that commissioners would like to raise at this time? Well, let's see. First of all, my thought was that we could address the issues that we talked about last time that had any loose ends. One question I had for you, Elaine, real quick. The addition of the Grace Lutheran Church and the other facility whose name I forget, that's not outside of what was already proposed. Those were just additional schools that fall within the 600-foot boundary that were omitted from your original map, right?
Correct.
Okay, so there's nothing we need to discuss there, that those would automatically fall under that exclusion zone.
Correct.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
So on what we previously discussed in regards to GPS, we had also asked for direction on section 5.32.110. In both instances, the commission agreed and required, but the requirement was onerous and would be difficult to enforce. I didn't necessarily agree. I was looking for further direction about jurisdictions locally. And it appears that GPS is state law, what Ms. Kabbalah just. So
right, as Elaine mentioned earlier.
That needs to be put back into the section, or however it was articulated to begin with needs to be.
Can I ask for a clarification from Keith? If it is state law, do we need to explicitly reiterate it, or is it just assumed that they have to operate according to state law and any additional regulations that we impose?
So it's required that they comply with all state laws and regulations governing cannabis. the purpose of putting it in a local ordinance is to give the city the authority to enforce that provision. If they violate a provision of state law that's not in the city's code, the city can't enforce it. They'd have to wait for the state to do that, and who knows if and when that would happen. So the idea of putting it in the local ordinance is to give the city some control over how that provision gets enforced.
I would suggest that that is very important, especially considering that even some jurisdictions don't even allow GPS or don't even allow deliveries, likely because those dispensaries aren't able to meet some of the state requirements for deliveries. So I think it's important, A, because it's state law, B, because now that we've fiddled with it, when we send this document over to the city council, it should be very clear about what was in it and you know, what powers they may be. And as it was originally included, I think it should stand.
Do we have okay. Keith, do you have the language of the original section? I've got
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure I could find it. Okay, I've got it right here. It was subsection 4 of 110, section 110. And it says a vehicle used for delivery of cannabis or cannabis products shall be outfitted with a dedicated global positioning system GPS device for identifying the geographic location of the delivery vehicle. The device shall remain active and inside of the delivery vehicle at all times during delivery. At all times, the licensed retailer shall be able to identify the geographic location of all delivery vehicles that are making deliveries for the licensed retailer and shall provide that information to the city upon request.
Okay. And that is consistent with the phrasing of the state law?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any issues with putting that back in. Does anybody else have strong objections? Since they have to abide by it anyway. My original concern with some of the language in that section was that it seemed unenforceable. But that's the city's problem, not.
And so let me give you an example, Eric.
Sorry, Heather, hold on. Bob was saying something first, but he was muted.
Nope. Yes.
Bob, you're still muted if you were trying to say something.
No, what's right?
Wait, you unmuted for a second and then you remuted yourself. There you go.
I wasn't saying anything.
Okay. Sorry, Heather. Go ahead then.
Now I got to remember what I was thinking about in my COVID haze. Okay. Can we please meet in person if we can all demonstrate that we've been vaccinated? Please. Okay. What I was trying to give was an example, Eric, on why I think that's important, specifically for the city to possibly enforce. And I would think the county would have a vested stake in it as well, because if you think of, I live on Sycamore Drive, and I bad example. I live on Cheyenne, which is county out in Meadow Creek, okay? And I order delivery from the city of Bishop. I don't know, I guess it's gonna get lost in the weeds, but essentially I can see why it would be important to know where the delivery is coming from and where it's going. Especially when it comes to like maybe auditing of your deliverables in some way. That's all.
Yeah, I don't argue with the content of your statement. I was just concerned about how the city would actually enforce it. And I don't want to see a whole lot of language in here that's unenforceable. But if it's consistent with state law, it's consistent with state law. And enforcing it then becomes the problem of the enforcement body. So I'm happy with it.
Chairman Lynch, can I ask a question with regard to that issue?
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, I want to ask it from Keith. And the question is, would a car originating from a dispensary in the county but not in the city be required to have GPS when they enter the city?
By the state law, yes. The state law
By
would
the state
require it.
law.
Yeah.
Okay. So the county would have to write their own ordinance if they wanted to enforce it.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is consensus on adding that section back in, and we can move on, I think. Are there other comments? Let's see that. The only remaining issue from last time was that we wanted to see the maps of the specific plan overlay. And we've seen them. Do we have any comments about that?
I would just make a comment. I would actually make a motion, I guess, because that's the quickest way to get it done. But I think I'd like to make a comment, and then if we want to have discussion, I can make a motion. And like you said, it can either get shot down or we can continue on. I think that's the cleanest way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, after reviewing the maps and doing some extensive kind of walkabout and talk with some of our local business owners, being a substitute teacher and having read through the plethora of information that was provided to us by Principal Dave Kalk at our last meeting, and just taking into consideration, I think that we should essentially limit the cannabis dispensaries to the areas outside of Clark Street to Grove Street and Whitney Alley to Warren. And that's what has been kind of delicately described to me as the crosshairs of Bishop. This downtown kind of cross area of the old town Bishop that a lot of the locals would like to see restored to more of a historic sense. That was my like the comment I made about why Line Street jogs, is because that way the horses couldn't run away from, you know, the locals. This is the feedback that I have been given, and I know there are a few empty buildings in that area, but it's only a few. And I think that after this COVID wave kind of subsides, that there's plenty of entrepreneurial spirits in this area that will fill those spaces. And then I think it leaves plenty of space in the C1, C2 zones remaining for dispensaries. It's also the heavily trafficked area for our local school children walking back and forth. And I know this, you know, there's a lot of discussion at the city council level about safe walk to school and the vaping flavored ordinance. It sounds like that's, you know, maybe something we'll discuss later, but it's the tourism aspect of what do we want Bishop to really kind of represent in the world, in our little community. And for me, it would be to preserve that historic district and not have cannabis dispensary in that area.
Okay, Elaine.
Just for my clarification, Commissioner Lynn, you said Clark to Willow?
Clark Grove.
To Grove.
Yeah, because Grove only goes west, right? And it would hit whatever, I don't know if there's an alley right there at Whiskey Creek in the old Bank of America, but it would be south of that.
For simplicity's sake and for the sake of discussion, I would just say that there is a downtown overlay zone that is already adopted by the city. It's separate from the specific plan. Largely, it only applies to the area within town that we don't require parking for those businesses. But there is a boundary that's established. It doesn't go as far north as Grove. It goes to May on the east side and Academy on the west side. And I'll see if I can pull that up in a map. Thank you.
Well, while you're, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Heather in that the district downtown has always been called the core area, and because of the lack of parking, it's almost self-regulating in that some major dispensary situation would be hard, especially for a non-local, to find a place to even park, let alone to find the stores to get into them.
Well, for my part, I thoroughly disagree with eliminating the central downtown area. To my mind, the stated purpose of this ordinance is to create a plan whereby cannabis businesses can reasonably operate within the city limits. And the only difference between dispensaries, within the core downtown area and dispensaries right outside the core downtown area is that it takes 30 seconds longer to walk to them from an access point of view. But from a real estate point of view, it eliminates, just roughly looking at the map, fully 50% of the area that would be available to those businesses. And to me, that seems like it's crippling this effort right out of the gate. And what the city council, has asked us to do is to comment on how we would regulate businesses, not to try and cripple the effort, and send them an ordinance that, in my opinion, is dead on arrival. I think that that's the purview of the city council to decide how severely to limit businesses within the city limits. And I would suggest that, the city council has the ability to make that decision. And we could certainly make a recommendation to the city council, but I would prefer not to see it in this ordinance, especially because that specific plan overlay, one of the stated goals of that specific plan is to increase opportunities for mixed use, not diminish them. Furthermore, I feel like, I understand, like you have a particular, Heather, you in particular have a very specific vision of what you want downtown to look like. But, if we want to restore Bishop to its historic roots, we would add about 800 more bars, saloons than there currently are, and probably a few brothels to boot.
I think maybe being exaggerative there.
Okay, maybe not 800, but maybe 80.
And I do sincerely want you to understand, Commissioner Leach, that it's not just my vision. It is the vision of several business owners downtown who have been there for many decades, accumulatively, and many long-term locals who have approached me and said, why are we going to be slinging marijuana downtown? This isn't why we live here. This isn't why I raised my family here. This isn't why my grandchildren come here to visit. And it's a broader picture than that. And I don't think I think regulation, if you want to talk about crippling, that's what regulation is. It is stunting something purposefully in order to make sure it's done right, it's done appropriately. And so again, it would be, I'm happy to make the motion now, unless I see somebody that's desperate to talk about it, because I think that's either the way to kill it or to fly on, and I feel feverish. So
I need to add.
I'm happy for you to make the motion, but I think there's more discussion that people want to make. Tricia.
I just need to add that Grove Street, and it only with the overlays of the schools, it would impact 1 or 2 blocks, which is still something to consider. Grove Street is a safer route to school. It is that's why the upgrade happened with the sidewalks and the accessibility a few years back. So that is the path that everyone is trying to funnel children from the east side of Main Street to use to get to elementary school.
Fortunately, the reality of that is many children, especially on the southeast you know, between Line and Main in that south corner, 2nd Street, 1st Street, 3rd Street, many of those children do not walk all the way to Grove Street. They still come up Main Street to Line and to their schools.
Mine included.
Elaine. Sorry, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. I was wondering if the commission would find it useful to see the map of where that downtown overlay is separate.
Yeah, I
and
think
distinct
it
from
might
the
be nice to
specific-
see it again. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is distinct from the proposed specific plan boundary.
Right.
Um,
And while we're doing that, Heather, yeah, I don't mean to say that's just your opinion. I know other people have that opinion too. And I have also been approached by as many people who are perfectly fine seeing retail businesses all along the Main Street corridor. So yes, what I meant to say is that is a vision of downtown that you know a group of people would like to see, and there are other visions that other groups would like to see, and certainly not just yours.
so
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say,
as-
can you explain this?
yes, sorry. So I have it zoomed in a bit. I'll zoom out for context. So this blue hatched area here in the center of town that focuses on a couple of blocks north and south of Line Street. It's not included here in the zone categories, but that, I guess if you look up here in the overlay areas, that's our downtown core overlay, which is a boundary that is already defined within our zoning code, if that's helpful in any way to you. And I can zoom in so that you can see it for a little more context.
So just for clarification, that includes 3 bars, if I include the Rambler. Does that include the adult store?
No.
No, don't think it does. Okay. Thank you.
So also for clarification, this downtown overlay is pretty much the boundaries that you're proposing, Heather, right?
No, they're totally separate.
Okay.
Yeah, Line would start where Clark is, but it would continue on to the corner of Lagoon because that is a historic building. It was the original jail or one of the original jails.
Yeah, the one that's currently the Lux Salon.
Yeah. And I think to have that as a dispensary would be frankly atrocious. And then it would go all the way up to, it would go further than that. It would go, which many of this area, can you zoom out? Is that me or you? Can you zoom out a little bit, please? It would go, keep going, because you don't even have Grove on there yet.
I do.
Oh,
Oh,
she does.
no, I do. Grove is right here.
Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay. So everything from Grove to essentially Academy is either parking lot, Jack's Restaurant, Max Sporting Goods. I think there's Booney Bean in that, which is full. Eastern Sierra Bank, another bank, or no, the other bank's on the other side. So they're businesses that are full and thriving and are parking lots. They're not empty spaces that would be purchased for redevelopment anytime soon. It would not, however, prohibit somebody from developing, say, on the soon to be vacated Warren Grove County facility area that currently houses Health and Human Services. That would still, as far as I could tell from the red zoning of the 600 feet, Elaine, I think Warren is free game. And there are many.
Warren, sorry, I think Warren is already excluded by the 600-foot zone.
That 600-foot map, I would remind the commissioners that is approximate. The state law, requires that measurement is from the 2 closest points between 2, a sensitive use and a potential dispensary. And I can't possibly map all of those scenarios with a sort of blanket 600 foot. So that could vary a little bit as you reach the outer edges of that radii about exactly where it hits Warren Street.
Could you show your map though with the circles that you drew around the schools?
Yeah, if Zoom will let me.
Because my memory of that was that pretty much all of Warren was gone in that area also.
Thanks. Thank you. Very helpful. Sorry. Okay, so this is the map that includes the specific zone, specific plan boundary, and then this would be the one that does not include that specific plan boundary. And
It looks pretty open to me.
So here, this is Warren here. So as I said, it would depend on the specific property.
Well, it looks pretty locked off to me until you get to Line Street, right?
Where is that Grove in Grove? It'd be here, wouldn't it? So this would
Yes. So it's
parking lot
Line
for
Church
Jack?
Academy. What happens after Academy? Pine Grove.
Pine.
So this is Grove right here.
Yeah, so it would be, if that is Grove, directly south of that is the parking lot for Jack's Snacks. And this area right there would be free game.
But most of Warren, except for that little notch close to the C1, until you get to Line Street, is already excluded. Is I guess what I'm pointing out.
Well, it's already full too. There's not a lot of.
Well. There are empty storefronts on Main Street in the central corridor, and Elaine can comment on how many. But we're also.
I could, but I would also add that planning is a fourth dimensional exercise. So it doesn't really matter what's there now.
Yeah.
What I would say is I think perhaps before we deliberate on a property by property and block by block basis, the boundary, there should be general consensus with the commission if that is what you would like to do.
How do we deliberate generally? How do we be consensual and deliberate?
Well, so what I'm saying is we're making the discussion is operating at a very fine grain of detail, and I think that maybe there should be a consensus within the commission if you want to keep the ordinance at having that blanket 600-foot prohibition, or if you want to expand that and develop a specific boundary that would that you would also include. Because if the general consensus of the commission isn't to incorporate an additional boundary, then then we probably shouldn't debate the specific block by block particulars of a potential boundary.
I also just want to add that, keep in mind that the planning director and the city council have broad discretion to review any application for a business, even within the allowed zone, and say, no, we don't want to say business there. It's too close to, a path to school, or it's too close to a historically significant business, or any reason they want to reject it. So not making these restrictions in this document doesn't prevent the city council or the planning office from making those decisions down the road. But if we put very specific things in here right now, as Elaine points out, we're planning for the future. That could certainly cripple us down the road.
Yeah, and I feel the same, but in the opposite, Eric, which is if we were to be specific about this document as best as we can be, which I felt we spent 3 hours last time doing, and send it over, the city could quickly override it and determine, no, we're not going to use that. We're just going to keep it open to the zoning. But at least if there is some consensus in this commission, then it lets the city understand that we are concerned about this as a group, or a portion of the group, and therefore, they can mull that over at that level and determine whether or not they want to abide by that or revise it further to remove that kind of limitation. But if we don't say anything, I'm not comfortable with that. So that's why I'm speaking up.
Okay, well, I do think that Elaine's proposal is a good way to proceed. We can have a motion on the general, do we want to fiddle, manually fiddle with the boundaries or not? And then if we vote to do so, then we can have motions about where those boundaries should be.
And I have a question regarding if, for instance, somebody wanted to apply for a permit somewhere where it's just on the edge, or they would nominally fall in the 600, like at the edge of the 600-foot thing, could they apply for a conditional use permit at that point to operate?
I would go with no.
Okay.
I don't recall exactly what the powers of appeal are, but generally they would not meet the
state minimum is right. Okay, so
Yeah.
the state minimum of 600 feet is in stone.
Yes.
Right, we can't countervene that. Okay, so I then to make some progress here, I would make a motion that we leave the boundaries as they are at the 600-foot limit from schools or whatever the statement is in the document, rather than manually tinker with them. And then we can vote on that and decide where to go. If I can get a second.
I second that
Second
motion.
your motion.
Okay, so to be clear, before we call for a vote, a yes vote would be to leave the boundaries as currently stated in the document at the 600-foot limit. Michelle, can we call for a vote? You're muted. You're
Who
still
was the
muted.
second?
Me?
And, oh, okay,
Thank you, Heather.
Andrew and Heather.
Sorry, Andrew.
Okay. It was Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay. Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
No.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yes, leave it in the way it is.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes,
yes?
yes,
Thank you. Commissioner Liu,
No.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
motion approved. Delete the boundaries of the 600 feet limit from schools.
Okay. All right. I think those were all of the residual issues from last month's meeting. Do we have new items that have come up since then?
I have a couple if you're available.
Please, and you in particular, since you weren't present. For
Yeah,
last
and I'm
meeting.
trying to keep it limited because I wasn't present.
Okay.
I do, sorry, I've got this all on my screen. Let me go to it. With regards to the signage on the automobile that is delivering, this is, hold on, let me scroll up so I can see it, 532.110, section C, number 6. No display of any logo, signage, or other information that identifies, advertises, or lists the services or products offered shall be placed on the vehicle. So this relates to a question we asked earlier. Can we enforce that from a vehicle that might originate outside of the city of Bishop, say from a location in the county? And that might be directed to Keith.
No, so we would only be able to enforce this against businesses that are lawfully operating in the city of Bishop. So if a dispensary from the county drives through Bishop with a blaring sign on the top, certainly we could work with the county sheriffs to address that, maybe call their planning department or their business regulation enforcement division, but we would not be able to enforce this against another entity.
And then correlative, can we enforce it once a vehicle leaves the city of Bishop? So it originates from Bishop, leaves Bishop, crosses into county territory, and then they stop, put on a big sign on their car, like a large magnet sign, which can be done. Can we enforce that?
Yes.
So if they're driving through the county originating from Bishop, they're in conflict with our code.
Yeah, because we hold their license. We can yank their license and enforce it.
Okay. To this point, and maybe it's worth discussing, maybe it's not. I'm just not sure that that's a fair. That's a handicap we're going to place on City of Bishop that the county does not have. Might be worth the discussion. It's also a small issue. It was not a major concern of mine. The next one will be a larger concern. So any discussion, anybody, any thoughts on that?
My general thought is to agree that it's an unnecessary handicap, especially if, you know, we already have a development plan that the businesses have to agree to with the city, and we've already discussed signage being part of that development plan. So I think, you know, the appearance of the vehicles and what signage is on there could certainly fall under that development plan. That would be my thought.
I would say that if we're going to split hairs, I'm probably going to have to be dismissed at some point. So I'm trying to be respectful in that. Otherwise, if we can have like a 5-minute break so I can at least use the restroom, I would appreciate that. Meaning there seems like there's a lot of things that have been written into this ordinance purposefully, following state law, following local jurisdictions, and are already precedent. And we're going to, if we're going to spend another hour and a half hacking away at it, I'm feeling frustration there and a little sick.
Sorry, you're not feeling well, Heather. I totally understand. And Keith, you can comment on this, but I wouldn't characterize this as, you know, this is the standard that everybody else, you know, follows. As Keith mentioned at the last meeting, every jurisdiction has a pretty different ordinance, and a lot of this was, you know, cut and pasted from, you know, a somewhat randomly selected other jurisdiction, and then, you know, honed and what we're doing is trying to hone that to be specific to Bishop. Keith, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, we didn't select a random jurisdiction. We pulled this generally from one of our other cities where we've done this. The idea is to give the city as much control over this process as possible, and then scale it back to whatever degree the city is comfortable with. Our direction was to get the conversation started. And so as a default starting point for that discussion, we gave the city as much regulation authority as we thought we could. And then things like this, if the commission and ultimately the council wants to scale it back, they certainly can. We start cutting things that are too onerous.
Okay. Well, I would certainly agree. I also don't think it's a huge issue.
Right.
I'd be happy to see this struck.
To Heather's point, it is a small issue. It was a minor one. I just wanted to know if it was worth addressing. If anybody else feels strongly about it, speak up. It was the only thing that I noticed that I thought was small. I'm going to mention one other larger issue next.
Okay. Does anybody else feel that this should be gotten rid of? Okay. I'm not hearing enough consensus to get rid of this, so let's move on.
All right. So then the next one, and I think this is more urgent. This is 532-100. This is regards to the records and record keeping. This is number 3 under Part A. Each storefront cannabis dispensary shall maintain a record of all persons, patients, collectives, and primary caregivers served by the cannabis dispensary for a period of no less than 4 years, or as required by state law, whichever is lesser period of time. I would just like to see that the wording that this is confidential information. In other words, this cannot be shared outside of these parties. This also applies to the delivery where everybody has to sign for it. What I'm really trying to avoid here is a release of a list of names of people who received or done business. I'm almost certain it's already illegal with regard to patients, because that would be HIPAA law. But I would like to make sure that everybody is aware that the city can't release a list of names, and that the owner can't release a list of names. And I would be concerned that someone might try to use a list of names to do something as gross as blackmail somebody. And I think that's important.
So, but then Keith, my question would be, is this is this a regulatory statement common in recreational cannabis dispensaries, or was this more geared towards the medicinal side?
This is common. The idea is to keep these businesses running above board and transparent when the city wants to review the books and make sure that there's no criminal activity going on in this emerging field of commerce. This does not make these records a public record simply because it's a topic of the ordinance. These businesses are required to maintain these records. They're under no obligation to disclose them publicly. If the city does conduct an audit and somehow obtains these records, the exemptions from the Public Records Act that protect private information would apply, and the city would be within its rights and required really to maintain those privileged.
Agreed. My concern is that through the record keeping, someone might release information that would not be appropriate. So it might be the business itself. I would rather see that not happen. I would rather see the business not be able to do that either. I would rather see only this information to be shared by, quote, the enforcement official and the business itself. They have to maintain confidential records.
Yeah, we could certainly put in the word confidential and require that they treat these confidentially. That's certainly within the city's authority to reasonably regulate these businesses.
That seems reasonable to me. Is there a specific place we would insert that in the current language?
I would put it, each storefront cannabis dispensary shall confidentially maintain a record of all persons, patients, and then go on from there.
I'd be happy with that modification.
Sorry. I was gonna say, I would think that would be important, not only for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Again, it's creating an above board, but at the same time, private relationship.
Do we have any objections to adding that? Okay, great. Let's move on then. Other issues that people want to raise? I have a couple. Well, sorry. First of all, I wanted to be respectful of Heather's request. Keith, is it okay to have a 5-minute recess?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then before we proceed, why don't we just call a 5-minute recess and we'll reconvene when everybody's back. Sorry, in 5 minutes we'll reconvene. I think we have one more minute on our clock, but do we have Harry back with us?
Yeah, Harry's back.
Okay, great. That's everybody then, right? We're not waiting for anyone? Okay. Then let's see. I wanted to bring up one of the issues also touched on by Mr. Calvert. Shows where you're from, how you pronounce that name. In section 532, 120. And that was E3. Yeah, E3. The section about entering a cannabis business at any time during the hours of operation to obtain samples. That struck me as something that we don't do for other industries. And it seemed to me, especially after Mr. Calvert's comments, that it seems unnecessary because this is a heavily regulated industry, and the THC content or the CBD content or whatever it is that we would be seizing samples to check is already highly regulated by the state. So this seemed to me like, and possibly something that could be a lawsuit, but also inconsistent with how we treat other industries and unnecessary overreach. I'm not sure that the city would have a plan of what to do with those samples if they seize them. So.
Eric, what section was that again, please?
Yeah, it's section 5.32.120.E.3.
Okay.
On page 31. And it begins, the city administrator, well, it reads, the city administrator or his or her designees charged with enforcing the provisions of this chapter may enter the location of a cannabis business at any time, blah, 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 without notice to obtain samples of the cannabis to test for public safety purposes. Any samples obtained by the city of Bishop shall be logged, recorded, and maintained in accordance. Because of, the state regulation, because it's not clear to me, this seems like then the city of Bishop has to have a whole testing arm that we're developing around this industry. It seems unnecessary, and it seems like a bit of government overreach.
It seems like a very basic request, actually, to make sure that your local distribution center is not tampering with the product that's been provided from them, and that we would be the closest hand on, or eyes on, or person to facilitate that. So if your city administrator comes into the dispensary and says, "Show me what you got," and some of the packaging has been tampered with, possibly cut open, or isn't being distributed according to its milligrams or whatever, that's a mechanism for then the city to sound the alarm and say, this dispensary is not following the rules.
Well, show me what you got and give me samples to take away and test in a laboratory seem like different things to me. I agree with you. If you come in and, there's packaging that's been tampered with, that's a red flag. But you could say, hey, you've got packaging that's inconsistent with state regulations. We're going to write you up. Otherwise, if you have untampered packaging, you could ask for the state issued certificate of authenticity or whatever the thing's called.
It says public safety purposes. It's very general. So
If I could step in, I think the purpose behind this section in other jurisdictions is so that law enforcement could come in and sample the cannabis to make sure it's not laced with any other hallucinogen or other illicit substance that the dispensary may be trying to sell, under the table or something to that effect. I think that's the thrust of this section.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would ask whether this is a solution in search of a problem or a real thing.
So Keith, I have a question. If you've written this or observed this before, because I'm not sure of any other municipalities, there's got to be a cost involved in this. Is that correct, Keith?
Well, for the city administrator to exercise it right. Say it again.
The testing portion. I'm not concerned about somebody looking to make sure tamper-proof packages, but
Right. So the city administrator goes in under this authority, or designates authority to a law enforcement officer. They have field test kits and other technology test the presence of cocaine or angel dust or various hallucinogens or other narcotics. I don't know that they would need a lab. I can't speak to what capabilities the police department has on hand at this point, but I think this section is designed to address that problem, or to allow the city to address that problem if it arises.
I think it's super pertinent because, I mean, just as everybody wants to continue to use the, we have all of these bars, ABC goes in and tests alcohol periodically, and I don't see a whole lot of state regulatory persons marching around in our neck of the woods. So this would give, if a complaint would be filed, hey, my child got a hold of some marijuana that came from this dispensary from his brother, who's 22 years old, and ended up in the emergency room. This gives the police department a mechanism to research that.
That was actually a question I had, Heather, whether the same procedure was followed for alcohol distributors. Okay.
ABC can come into your bar at any time and measure the alcohol percentage in your bottles to make sure you're not watering it down, and to, they could to test in theory for roofie or whatever else.
Okay. Then I'm satisfied with that. Are there other concerns about this section from anyone else?
no, I think that answered it for me.
Okay. Then I had one other issue, but I want to give the floor to somebody else and not just keep talking.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
So in section 5.32.090, section I, signage and notices. And I know this might feel a little onerous. I think it's very simple. I would like to request that a health warning, it's regarding signage. And, while there's a sign saying you can't smoke inside and you can't smoke in the nearby area, I would also like, and it's common practice in some places, in fact, it's in Mono County, that a sign just be placed in the store that is a health warning. That, not all cannabis is a medicinal thing. And by the same token, regarding this conversation about alcohol, and for that matter, gasoline, there are health warnings when we purchase these items. And so Mono County has it. Inyo County does not.
Is that a requirement at all on the state for them to make postage of that?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I haven't seen that in another local jurisdiction. I'd have to do some research on whether or not we have the authority to do that.
It's my understanding that it's a voluntary thing. I'm just going off a cannabis score sheet for retailers, county by county, municipality by municipality. And Mammoth and Inyo do not, Mono does. Just have that requirement that a small sign be posted.
Trisha, if you, given your work, you probably know more about this than certainly I would. But what is the state of research of the health effects of marijuana? And is there an agreed upon consensus statement that could be made, or are you asking businesses to say this could be bad for you without the evidence to back it up?
I don't know what the model language is. I'm sure this scorecard that I'm using, I've just printed out the municipalities, basic compliance or non-compliance or use or non-use of these things would have model language that is legally acceptable and would not cause liability and would be scientifically backed. So, by the same token regarding alcoholic beverages, the references to birth defects and what other things that are listed. And it's the same one for gasoline. It could be just the same one as the proposition that we have in California for the potential to have birth defects from use, which I can very well see. The same thing with tobacco.
Well, I don't have a problem with the idea, but it's not clear to me,
What the exact
Whether the-
language is?
yeah, what the exact language is and what we could require businesses to say, like which authority needs to comment on the health effects of marijuana before that becomes a true statement, right? Is it the Surgeon General? Is it, you know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
I agree, Patricia, that they should be required to post something like that, like they are in the bars and even on your prescription, Percocet, it says if you are pregnant or nursing, blah, 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 right? So maybe we can, if we don't have the language, we could like earmark a comment to the city if we agree at the end on this ordinance. And it goes as like, here's a few comments that we would like the city to further look into and incorporate in the ordinance.
And it could be under their purview anyway, because it's a,
Yeah, I like that idea, Heather, because it seems like a good thing to do, but I don't know that we have the content to write it in there.
Sure, absolutely.
Do we have objections from other commissioners to make that recommendation? Okay. I'll go to my the last point that stuck out to me, and that was about the uniform security guards. And what section is that? That is the final section of 532-100, section B, security measures. Yes. Section L, the final subsection, where it states that for the first 12 months of operation, uniformed licensed security personnel shall be employed to monitor site activity, control loitering and site access, and to serve as a visual deterrent. And then following the first 12 months, you can request a waiver. That seems like a particularly onerous requirement on businesses, given that there isn't really much evidence from, and I know, former police chief commented on this to the city council about increased crime since dispensaries started both in Mammoth and in Bishop. Mr. Calvert also referenced that, and also referenced anecdotally, what the experience has been in his store. What I'm suggesting is that we, if you say it has to be a uniformed licensed security personnel, then I think that means it has to be somebody hired from an external agency, which is a big cost to a business for a problem that hasn't been demonstrated to exist. And we already say, there's a section I that talks about security personnel, and I'm wondering if they don't have to be separate uniformed, hired from an outside service, but they could be people who are already hired by the business, the owner or an employee who is licensed by the state of California as a security personnel, but simply not wearing a uniform.
Okay, so Eric, really quick, Keith, I want to know what the standard practice is in a second, but Eric, for clarification, a licensed security representative or uniformed licensed security personnel, that typically means for the state of California that you have a guard card. That's what that's called. And that you have completed a certain amount of either post peace officer standards and training, units of education. You've gone through, some guards have a higher education, others have just taken the course. I'm not sure how long the course is, but there is a course to receive your guard card. It's what most of your mall cops actually have. And I don't know, Keith, you can tell me I'm wrong, that would require you being subletted or whatever from another agency. It would essentially mean that they say, anybody that has a guard card that meets these qualifications, we'd like for you to work for us, kind of thing.
And to keep to that question, does anybody know, do we have such people in Bishop for any other service? I know that there were guards at the casino, but that's not Bishop.
There are also guards at the courthouse that are at all your courthouses during all of your hearings that screen, and they are an agency that I can't think of, sorry, but they're an agency that provides those those types of services
So
locally.
such people exist in this community. That's what I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Right.
Do the dispensaries in your county outside city limits have guards? Does anyone know?
I looked at the ordinances. I didn't see any requirement for it, but Keith, I think you guys looked into this in more detail.
It's only 12 months, the first 12 months. So
But did they?
Sorry, you're muted, Keith, if you're talking.
Sorry, the state regulations on cannabis retailers require that a licensed retailer have a security guard that is licensed under specific provisions of the Business and Professions Code. So this is a requirement in state law that a retailer, other than a micro business, which this ordinance doesn't address, have one of these security personnel, a licensed security personnel on site during the hours of operation. So while it may not be required by INYO's code, it's required by state law. And it's for that reason, it's common, it's required.
Okay, but Keith, just further clarification. Does that person have to be wearing a uniform, or can that person be a licensed, a security personnel licensed by the state California Bureau of Security
a
Investigative
uniform is a
Services?
T-shirt with your name on it.
Well, Keith, answer, and then we'll get to that.
Without knowing the requirements for a security under this section of the Business Professions Code, whether or not they have to wear, I would assume, and I don't want to speak out of my expertise, but I would assume that while they're working, there's some regulation on these type of security officers that say they need to wear a uniform. That said, I don't know if there's a prohibition on them being an in-house employee that's also licensed, or whether or not they just contract with a company that hires these licensed security guards. That's another question that I'd have to research if you want to go down into to that level of detail.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Heather.
If you went to the Business and Professions Code, Eric, it would tell you what a licensed security guard would have to look like. And I would tell you it would mean essentially khakis and a shirt identifying them with a name if they had a badge number, and also their identification, which would be available to the public. So somebody could say, what is your name and badge number? And they would have to provide that. It is not a full outfitted SWAT looking uniform in a police attire in any way. And in fact, I don't believe that they have, some do have any kind of like formal badge, like a star or anything like that. Some do, but it can be covert or less menacing, if that's how you want to.
Yeah, which is the other issue that that Mr. Calvert's public comment raised, that it having that visual presence when it's not needed according to the statistics is a detriment to the business, right?
It sounds like state law though.
Well, it's state law to have a security personnel, whether or not they have to wear a uniform, I guess is the question.
And I was actually kind of curious about that, because as a marketing person, I would actually want somebody with a T-shirt advertising my business and the word security on the outside of it. I didn't think that was that onerous. It was the idea that they had to be licensed, but now we've confirmed that they have to be, so I can't fix that.
Yep.
It seemed expensive.
Yeah,
but the uniform part's a windbreaker that costs $12 with the word security on it.
Yeah, well, my main concern was that this was not adding a requirement that they hire an external, security agent from another business, because that seems like a major expense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it doesn't sound like they have to have somebody. And again, I'm going to bet that the guards at the casino are probably just as qualified to do that there as here.
Okay. So is there any enthusiasm from anyone else for getting rid of section L?
No, I just had one more question. It reads that this is for the first 12 months of operation. Is that consistent with the state law as well, that it's only required for 12 months, or is that something that's specific to this ordinance?
12 months, and then to be reviewed by the city administrator after. So they could be required. So say they have a violation or something, the city administrator could say, may request a waiver from the chief of police, sorry.
But it sounds like the waiver may be could be as simple as he doesn't have to wear a uniform after 12 months. If the state still requires that you have a licensed security person. Okay, well, I don't hear any consensus for changing that, and as long as it doesn't require an external hire that would be an undue financial burden to the business, I'm happy with it. So I think those were all of the issues that I had. Is there anything else that?
Well, then, Chairman Leach, just briefly, since we brought up the 2 of the 3 issues that were mentioned in the letter, he mentioned the issue with flavored product. Did we want to review that? It was an interesting point in that they sell flavored product, at least as I understand it, like some of the jewels.
The only thing I was going to say, Hank, is that, you know, according to Elaine's staff report, it was the recommendation of staff that that's outside the purview of the Planning Commission, and we can make a recommendation to the City Council.
Right. I just did we want to discuss that
to make it
because it was in his letter. I just want to make sure that we reviewed that. I'm again, I don't have a dog in the hunt either way. I just wanted to make sure that we're discussing it.
Sure.
So do we want to discuss a recommendation? I don't mind if we don't.
I'm happy to leave that up to City Council.
All right, good.
Same here. And I'm the one who brought up flavors last time. And so.
And I see that was actually in the newspaper that the city is talking about that in regards to tobacco. So I believe that they are well informed about the issue at hand, and we'll leave it up to them to discuss that further.
Can I jump in with a few other things that are out of our wheelhouse that since we're on recommendations for the City Council to consider when they get the language? Again, it's going back to the metrics of other counties and comparing them. Inyo County actually has a very, very low score. They get 9 out of a possible 100 points in various public health measures that where Mammoth and Mono are in the upper half. So, and their businesses seem to be doing just fine. The county with the highest score is above 50. So these are things that are reasonable, that might seem moot at the moment, but I see them as I run across them for work. So they're things that we might want to just recommend that the City Council consider, because they may pop up in the future. And I know that seems to be, I could be accused of creating problems where there are no problems, but I see these things. And so just to try to address the public health concerns from the high school, from the health department, but while also permitting a business to legally operate and hopefully do well, I'd like to have the City Council consider addressing potential conflicts of interest and perhaps adding language that A, no prescriber be on premises, and B, no prescriber be a part owner of a business. That's just one of the things that was given that would keep the retailer separate from the conflict of interest aspect of running the business. Another thing that I see a lot, I would like the City Council to consider not granting permits for temporary events. You see this a lot down in San Diego and in Sacramento, where event organizers are hiring out the whole fairgrounds and opening to the public marijuana-friendly events. So that's something that I would like the City Council to consider, not granting those temporary permits. You know, if we're not permitting the use, you already have a smoke-free fairgrounds, but there could be another space in town that could be used. And they might be, these things might be moot, but if they're at least symbolically on there, maybe Bishop can get a better score than Inyo County. And I think that would be it.
Got a question for Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
When you say non-prescribed, I mean that person who doesn't need no marijuana, he cannot be inside the store.
No, that the person, okay, actually the prescriber on premises is moot because we're only going for retail adult use licenses. So thank you for that. But in marijuana licenses that are medical retailers, there are some stores that are set up that the doctor, the MD who writes the prescription is right there. So they are not only giving you the prescription to buy, you're buying from them.
That's illegal.
Or they apparently not. So
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Liu that it's no longer illegal because we've got the dual system of selling now. But it used to be illegal, right? Because they don't actually sell it, it's a cooperative. And I'm totally in agreement with her. I'm one of the things I'm hoping is that this highly regulated commercial sales business will put out of business a lot of the cooperatives, which are horribly less regulated to the degree that you can't stop. Well, at least when I was in Reseda and we were dealing with this, people are taking their medicine so they can take it in the park. And I would rather that not happen.
and
So,
conversely,
thank you for bringing that up.
well, and conversely also, big tobacco is getting into big cannabis. So they are, at least in Canada and in some states, looking into licensing in California cities. So just something to be aware of, so as written, we're not addressing a lot of these things, and I don't want to be thought of as trying to create more problems, but these are things that will come down the pipeline as I see them happening in other cities around the state. I think it's still, pardon me, go ahead.
Where did you get that matrix from? That's cool.
It's just a health advocacy group that is not anti-cannabis. It's called Getting It Right from the Start. And basically, there's a part where they rank counties, regions, and cities on their certain, what they consider good health policy. And so, and some of these things are moot for us, but we might want to have something in the books. For instance, state law no longer allows billboards on the highway, on state highways. And so since 395 and 168 are our main thoroughfares with billboards, it might be moot for us. But maybe we want something on the books reinforcing that. And that metric gets you 6 points on the scorecard. I don't know. I just was disheartened when I saw that Inyo was 9 points out of a possible 100, and it's in the lowest quartile of all municipalities, counties, and regions. So that's I want to try a little harder.
So Tricia, would the recommendation be to ask the city council to consider this? Just hand them the scorecard and say, hey, look at these metrics. And
no, just the ones that I brought up that I thought might be something that we could achieve easily for our community that may not be, that are tailored for our community. I don't know that we want a cannabis event at the fairgrounds. Maybe we do, I don't know, but just if we're,
So my takeaway that the most relevant ones of the ones you were discussing, given the state of other laws, what was considering not allowing permits for temporary events.
Right.
Is there another big one that you call out, or was that kind of the main one?
It would be that one, and then the one I brought up earlier, which was the health warning sign in store.
Right.
That doesn't impede a retailer from working at all and selling what they're going to sell, but just
sure.
The messaging should be consistent with this is a substance.
Yeah. Well,
and
sorry.
Yeah, model language can be found.
I'm assuming that staff is keeping track of the various recommendations that we're suggesting we make to City Council.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other discussion? Okay, then I will. So Keith, how should this go? Do we want Elaine to summarize the modifications that we've proposed? Or can we make a motion to recommend that the City Council adopt this ordinance with the amendments that we've discussed?
If the council would like a summary, I can certainly give you one. I'm sure Elaine's been taking good notes, or we could just move to a motion as amended.
Okay.
I'll make that one.
I will second that motion. Okay, so the official reading of this, please help me out here, would be that, well, Heather, I guess it's your motion. So, well, okay, I can help out if you're feeling COVID
No,
woozy.
hold on. Let me get to the back. Hold on, or the front. I make a motion to approve the ordinance as presented with its amendments discussed this evening. Title 17, Chapter 17.79, entitled Marijuana Cultivation and Marijuana Related Businesses. Amending Title 17, Chapter 17.80, entitled Legal Requirements, and adding Chapter 5.32, entitled Commercial Cannabis Activity.
Is that a sufficiently legal statement, Keith?
I think the motion should be to approve the resolution that recommends adopting that ordinance.
Right,
Please.
because the city council has the final decision on this. Okay,
Okay,
so
yes.
then,
Yes, the resolution to adopt the ordinance.
The resolution recommending adopting the ordinance.
The resolution recommended adopting the ordinance as amended this evening.
That should do.
okay.
Footnotes. Okay, yes.
Well, then the recommendations to city council will happen as a matter of course. Is that correct, or do we have to separately vote on that?
There will probably be some discussion in the staff report when this gets presented to the council on all
Okay.
of those comments that were just made.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I seconded Heather's motion. Michelle, can you call for a vote?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lind,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yeah.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis.
Yes.
Motion approved to approve the resolution recommending the ordinance as amended to the city council.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to everybody for sticking this out for so long over the course of 2 meetings. So let's skip ahead then and move to agenda item 7B, which is reorganization. It seems amazing that we have reached this point already, given that we've only had, what, two meetings before this one since we last appointed officers. So let's see. I will now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to open nominations, and I think we'll do it first for chairman, and then we'll vote on that nomination, and then we'll take nominations for vice chairman. And I will now open nominations and turn this over to Elaine.
Got a question. Didn't you have to turn that to Elaine first and then Elaine turns to the new person, something like that?
I was just reading the agenda item, but you may be right. I turned it over to Elaine.
And I'll take it from here. First, I'd like to thank Chairman Leach for serving as chair this year. It has been a very weird year transitioning to Zoom, and we've had too few meetings, unfortunately. So thank you for your service. And with that, I will call for nominations for the position of chairman, please.
I nominate Eric Leach to serve 1 more year to complete his whole year.
I second that nomination.
Okay, Chairman Leach, would you like to close
Okay,
the nominations for chairman?
If we have no other nominations, then I will close the nominations. Can we have a roll count to close the nominations?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lind,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Okay.
Congratulations, Mr. Leach.
Well, I think officially we have to have a roll call to vote on me, but since I'm the only candidate, I'm assuming that will pass. Do we need to have a vote, Keith?
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
Can we have a vote on my nomination to remain as chairman for another year?
Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothar,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yes.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis,
Yes.
Bless you.
okay, Leach will serve for another year as chairman.
And complete your year.
and complete an actual year. Okay. Now I think it's my duty to now open nominations for vice chairman.
I nominate Mr. Andrew G., the new kid in the block, to get more involved with the city council planning. To be vice chairman.
If we have no more nominations, Chairman Leach,
Sorry, we're having a roll call to close nominations.
yes.
Okay. Sorry, can I nominate Heather to stay on as vice chair for one more year also?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So if there's more than one commissioner is nominated, someone needs to make a motion to appoint one of the nominations.
And then we vote separately on the motion.
We vote only on one.
Okay.
I make a motion to appoint Heather.
Okay, so
I
we'll
second
take a
that
roll call
motion.
okay, we'll take a roll call for Lynn for vice chairman. Chairman Leach,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Lothrop,
Yes.
Commissioner Bakta,
Yeah.
Commissioner Truxillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaitis.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, Heather will serve for another year as vice chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. That concludes item 7B, new business, and that takes us to item 8, staff and commission reports.
Good
Elaine.
evening.
Take it away.
Good evening once more, commissioners. The only update I have this evening is that, as I mentioned last month, the city is in the process of updating its housing element, which is required by the state every 8 years. We are working with Bauer Planning and Consulting, which did the previous 2 housing element updates for us. And we're having our first public meeting on that tomorrow at 5:30. And that Zoom information is available on the planning department website under the housing element update webpage. I think that's all I have. So, sorry, I know that there's no significant updates on our specific plan. I'm expecting an administrative draft to share with you next month. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, that's 5:30 tomorrow.
Correct, 5:30 tomorrow.
Great. Okay, thank you. Then we will move to item 9 and adjourn this meeting. And we don't need to vote to adjourn, right? Okay, then we will adjourn the meeting at 8:16.
Ciao,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, and once again, thanks to everyone for sticking it out for 3+ hours last time and 2+ hours this time. Really appreciate it, but it's important, and I feel like, you know, we reached some compromises that touched on issues that lots of people had, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's something, and the city council can make a decision on it now.
So Eric, I feel ill. Can you bring me some broth? I know you're a good cook.
I have nothing in my fridge right now, but I do have some chicken broth in my freezer.
Well, my refrigerator is not working because I'm remodeling my kitchen on top of all of this loveliness.
I'll just suggest that your husband should be making soup for you. Yeah, Hank.
Hey, do you make your own broth?
I do. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. I've tried a couple times. I run out of time.
It's remarkably easy if you just store everything in your freezer until you're ready
Yeah.
to use it.